Every summer growing up, my family would drive deep into the Western Highlands of Scotland, to a place called Blackwater Fields. It wasn't even a village, just a scatter of old stone farms surrounded by pine woods and empty moorland. We'd leave our home in Manchester, drive 7 hours north, then crawl along narrow dirt roads until the world seemed to disappear behind us. Blackwater Fields was beautiful in a wild, desolate way. Jagged mountains rose like teeth against the horizon, the hills bleeding into each other under endless gray skies. The farms, with their moss-covered stone walls and sagging barns, looked like they'd been abandoned decades ago, except they hadn't. Life clung on here, stubborn and secretive. We always stayed at my granddad's farmhouse. You couldn't miss it. It was the only one painted appealing, sickly blue. This was my mother's side of the family, the Fergusons, and like everything else here, they were weathered, harsh, and strange. My mum had 8 brothers and sisters, and more cousins than I could count. I loved those summers. The long days fishing in black rivers, chasing chickens, and playing in haylofts. As I got older, though, things changed. My older sisters stopped coming with us, and I was left to wander alone. Luckily, I had one cousin near my age, Isla. Isla was fierce and fearless. She wasn't afraid to wade through the bogs barefoot or climb halfway up a crumbling cliff just to get a better view. Those summers were the best part of my childhood. My dad loved it too. He even once joked about moving up to Blackwater Fields permanently. But every time he brought it up, my mum's face would cloud over, and she'd quickly change the subject. "There's nothing for us here," she'd say. "Better to leave old ghosts where they lie." But the idea lingered even after she refused again and again. It was one late evening, after one of those long, heavy summer days, when Granddad asked me if I wanted to come along to the neighboring McLean farm. "Old Maureen's cow is birthing. Thought you might want to see it," he said, his voice rough as the gravel underfoot. I jumped at the chance. We bumped along narrow tracks until we reached a wide-open field fringed with thick trees. 3 farmers were already waiting at the gate. They stiffened the moment they saw me climb down from the Land Rover, exchanging tight glances. "What's the bairn doing here?" one of them barked. Granddad simply muttered, "He's got to know. He's blood." The farmers grumbled but didn't argue. We crossed into the field, the sun now a fading orange bruise on the horizon. I tried to keep up, but the thick heather and the uneven ground slowed me down. Before I realized it, the others were far ahead, swallowed up by the half-dark. I called out for Granddad, but my voice seemed to vanish into the wind. Then I saw it. A massive cow, standing alone, half hidden in the gloom. It stared at me with glassy black eyes, unmoving. I froze. Granddad always warned me that cows with calves could charge. Heart hammering, I edged around it, not daring to turn my back. Finally, I found the others gathered in a dip of the field. I hurried toward them, and that's when I saw her. Isla was there too, standing stiff as a board, staring at something beyond the group. I followed her gaze, and felt my stomach turn to ice. There was a cow lying in the grass, its sides heaving. Blood stained the earth all around her. But lying just beyond her, crumpled against the thistles, was the newborn. At least that's what I thought at first. It wasn't right. The thing had a calf's head, matted in wet, red fur, but the rest of it was wrong. Skin, pink and raw, stretched over a small, too-human body. Tiny arms curled to its chest. Legs bent in a way that was horribly familiar. It was about the size of a toddler. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I spun to Isla. What is that?" I choked out. She looked at me with wide, empty eyes. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "They didn't want you to see." I barely had time to react before a pair of headlights cut across the field. A battered white van pulled up, and out stepped a man in a dark coat. Not a farmer, something official, maybe. The adults moved toward him, speaking in low, urgent tones. Me and Isla were ushered into a nearby shed to wait. Inside, it was cold and musty. I tried asking Isla again what was going on. She just shook her head, arms wrapped around her knees. Finally, after what felt like hours, she spoke. So quietly I had to lean in. It happens, she said. Every few years. Always here. Always in Blackwater Fields. No one talks about it. We can't. I didn't want to understand. But deep down, some part of me did. And my mum, she knows, doesn't she? I whispered. Isla just nodded. Later, when the grown-ups came for us, they didn't speak a word. Granddad drove us back along the broken track in silence. The full moon had risen, throwing ghostly light over the fields. I kept thinking I saw things moving among the trees, hunched, twisted shapes slipping between the shadows. When we pulled up to the farmhouse, Granddad killed the engine and turned to me, his face grave. "You're old enough to know now," he said. "This place, it's cursed, boy. Been that way since before even my granddad's granddad was born. It's in the land, in the blood. And it don't let go easy." I stared at him, heart hammering. "But why?" I asked. "What is it?" Granddad's eyes were sad as he said, "Some say the land itself is angry. Some say we were never meant to settle here. Others say it's what we brought with us long ago. Blood debts." He laid a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, it ain't natural. That's why your mum left. That's why you'll leave too. You must." I nodded, but deep inside, I wasn't sure I could ever truly leave Blackwater Fields behind. Not now, because in the deepest part of me I knew some things you can't just walk away from. Some things, they follow. It had been years since that summer night. Years since I last set foot in the wild, brooding land that surrounded the village of Briar Glen. I grew up, left childhood behind, and buried those memories as deep as I could. But some memories, some curses, they don't stay buried. I never told a soul about what I saw that night in Briar Glen. Not my friends, not my wife, not even the therapist I saw briefly during college when the nightmares got too bad. I managed to live a life mostly untouched by it all, or so I thought. That changed last month. I had to return to Ireland for a work conference in Belfast. I told myself it wouldn't be a problem. Belfast wasn't anywhere near Briar Glen. I could land, do my 3 days of meetings, and fly out without stirring up anything old. But while scrolling through the hotel TV channels one rainy evening, something caught my eye. A news report. An isolated farming community, one I didn't recognize the name of, had called for veterinary assistance after a series of unexplained livestock deformities. The footage was blurry, probably filmed on a phone, but I didn't need a clear image to recognize it. I saw it in the way the farmers stood huddled together, pale and whispering. I saw it in the way the news crew was kept back, well away from the animals. I even recognized the unnatural, twisted shapes under the tarps. It was happening again, and not just in Briar Glen. I barely slept that night, lying there in the dark hotel room, the rain hammering the windows. I thought of Grain's words from all those years ago. "It's supposed to be a secret." I thought of Uncle Finnegan's haunted eyes, and of my mother's hands clutching my arms as she made me promise. I had lived my whole adult life pretending that night was some terrible childhood dream. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed answers. Real answers. Not the half-truths and whispered warnings I'd been given as a boy. And that's how I found myself, 2 days later, driving a rental car west, into the misty hills of County Armagh. I told myself it was just curiosity, that I'd drive by the village on the news, maybe have a look around, and leave. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't just chasing information. I was chasing a piece of myself that had been left behind in that dark field all those years ago. It didn't take long to reach the village. It wasn't on most maps. Just a scattering of stone cottages, a crumbling church, and a pub that looked like it hadn't seen new paint since before the famine. The moment I stepped out of the car, I felt it, the wrongness. It was a heaviness in the air, thick and wet, almost metallic. A faint buzzing in the ears, like standing under high-voltage wires. Even the sheep grazing near the road moved strangely, skittish, nervous, flinching at sounds that weren't there. I headed for the pub first. Inside, it was dim and smoky, filled with the low murmur of conversation. Every head turned when I entered. It was like walking into a trap. An older man behind the bar, gray beard, hard eyes, nodded stiffly. "What can I get you, lad?" I ordered a pint, trying to seem casual, and asked, like it was nothing, if he'd heard anything about the livestock troubles. The pub went silent. The bartender set my glass down with a heavy thunk. He didn't meet my eyes when he spoke. "We've heard. Best you be on your way, stranger. Some things aren't meant for curious folk." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand the truth, but something in his voice, something broken, froze the words in my throat. That's when an old woman sitting near the fire caught my eye. She was tiny, hunched over, with wild white hair and skin like old parchment. She motioned me over with a bony finger. I hesitated, then obeyed. "You seen it before?" she rasped, before I even opened my mouth. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. The woman's cracked lips twisted into something like a smile. "Then it don't stay in one place. It spreads, like a sickness in the ground, like a curse carried on the wind." My heart hammered painfully against my ribs. "What is it?" I whispered. She leaned closer. Her breath smelled like earth and rot. "Not of this world," she said. "Older than the stones. Older than the blood. Our grandfathers called it the hollowing. The land, it hollows out, twists what lives on it, makes 'em wrong." I wanted to ask more, but at that moment, the bartender barked sharply. "That's enough, Granny Marin." The old woman shrank back into her chair, muttering under her breath. The message was clear. No more talking. I left the pub shortly after, feeling all those eyes on my back the whole way. I should have gotten in the car and driven back to Belfast. Flown back to England. Left it all behind again. But I couldn't. Not when I saw the trail. Just beyond the pub, behind the crumbling church, a narrow path led into the woods. Fresh wool tracks marked the muddy ground, and something else, too. Drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled along. I followed. The path twisted through dense trees, the bare branches clawing at the gray sky. The deeper I went, the worse the smell became. A mix of death and something sweeter, fouler. Something that smelled alive in the wrong way. Then the path opened into a clearing, and I saw it. A shallow pit dug into the earth. At the bottom, half covered with black plastic sheets, were bodies. Dozens of them. Cows, sheep, dogs, and other things. Things that had the wrong limbs, the wrong skin, the wrong eyes. Some were still moving, twitching. One of them, a small thing no bigger than a child, turned its head toward me. Its eyes were human, and it smiled. I stumbled back, heart hammering, almost slipping in the sucking mud at the edge of the pit. The creature's smile stretched wider, too wide, splitting the skin at the corners of its mouth. Thick, black fluid oozed out, dripping into the churned-up earth below. I turned and ran. Branches tore at my face, mud sucked at my boots, but I didn't stop. I didn't even dare look over my shoulder. I could feel them behind me, a low, wet shuffling sound, like meat dragging across wet ground. Faster, closer. By the time I burst back out onto the village road, gasping for breath, the light had changed. The sky had darkened, clouds boiling overhead like something foul brewing. The few villagers still outside stared at me, their faces pale and grim, but none moved to help. None spoke. They just watched as if they knew exactly what was happening, and had already accepted it. I fumbled for the rental car keys in my pocket, finally managing to wrench the door open. I didn't even bother checking if something was following me. I knew it was. I slammed the door, jammed the keys into the ignition, and the engine sputtered to life with a gut-wrenching cough. As I roared down the road, gravel spitting from under the tires, I glanced once into the rearview mirror. A figure stood in the middle of the road where I'd just been, small, hunched, impossibly still, watching me go. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dying light. I didn't stop driving until I was back on the motorway, until the mist and twisted woods gave way to flat fields and the reassuring, ordinary ugliness of urban sprawl. Only then did I pull over onto the shoulder, shaking, and try to get my breathing under control. I told myself I'd leave it at that I'd seen enough. But even as I sat there, heart still racing, part of me knew the truth. I hadn't found answers yet, only more questions. And somehow, some terrible instinct whispered that if I didn't find out more, if I didn't understand what was happening, it wouldn't stay in that village. It would follow me home. It would find me wherever I tried to hide. I had to go back to Briar Glen, back to where it all started. It was full night by the time I reached the outskirts of Briar Glen. The village hadn't changed. Same crooked cottages, same narrow lanes swallowed by hedgerows. It was like stepping back into a nightmare, one I had barely survived the first time. I parked the car at the edge of the village and continued on foot. I didn't want to be heard. I didn't want to draw attention. It wasn't hard to find the field. Even after all these years, my feet remembered the way, carrying me through the tangle of overgrown paths to that old, crumbling stone wall. The field beyond was black under the moonlight, but I could still make out the twisted oak in the center, gnarled and bent as if straining away from something underground. The place where it had all gone wrong, where they had first come. I slipped over the wall and crept forward, every step feeling heavier, like the ground itself was trying to hold me back. The smell hit me first. That same sickly sweet rot I remembered, only worse now, stronger. Filled my nose, coated my tongue, made me gag. Something new had been added to the field since I'd last been there. A mound of earth, freshly turned, rising like a tumor from the center of the clearing. And atop it, something ancient. It wasn't a stone exactly, though it had the shape of a crude standing stone. It was darker than the night around it, seeming to drink in the faint moonlight rather than reflect it. Carvings writhed across its surface. Not symbols, but shapes, shifting as I stared, impossible to focus on. The moment I saw it, the buzzing in my ears returned. Louder now, almost a scream. The ground around the stone pulsed and shifted, as if breathing. And then I saw them, figures half buried in the soil. Human shapes, but wrong, too thin, too long. Their skin was the color of ash, and their eyes were empty, black voids that sucked in all light and warmth. They were watching me, waiting. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A voice, no voices, whispered from the darkness. Not in words I knew, but in meanings that sank into my bones. You are marked. You opened the way. You cannot leave. I staggered back, clutching my head, the whispers growing louder, more urgent. Images flashed behind my eyes, visions of places rotting from the inside out, of animals twisted into horrors, of people screaming as their bodies betrayed them. And always that black stone at the center. The source. I don't know how I broke free. Maybe some sliver of willpower they hadn't yet devoured. Maybe sheer animal panic. But somehow, I turned and ran, stumbling through the field, clawing my way back over the wall. As I fled down the lane, I heard it. A sound like no earthly thing. Not a scream, not a roar, a calling. Low and deep and endless, vibrating through the stones and soil and sky. Something had woken, something that would not sleep again. I made it back to the car, peeled out of the village, tires shrieking, not daring to look back even once. But I could feel it. A tether. A line stretching from that black stone to me, hooked deep into whatever part of the soul is weakest. And somehow I knew, running wouldn't save me. It had begun, and it would follow me wherever I went. The drive back to the city was a blur. Headlights sliced through the fog that seemed to thicken the further I got from Briar Glen. It wasn't natural fog, either. It rolled low across the ground like smoke, coiling in the ditches, reaching out long fingers that scraped the edges of the road. More than once, I thought I saw shapes moving within it. I cranked the radio just to have noise, but every station spat static and broken whispers that made my skin crawl. Eventually, I turned it off, driving in silence but for the roar of the tires and my own ragged breathing. When I finally crossed the city limits, I almost wept in relief. The streetlights, the normal hum of traffic, the blaring neon signs. All of it felt like a shield against the madness I had left behind. I made it home by 2:30, stumbling up the steps to my apartment building. Everything felt wrong. The hallway lights flickered as I passed under them, and the air carried a faint, sour stench like rotting leaves. Keys shaking in my hand, I fumbled the door open and stepped inside. Home. Safe. I bolted the door behind me, locked it, chained it, and even shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Only once I'd double-checked every window did I allow myself to collapse on the couch, trembling and exhausted. Maybe I could forget. Pretend it never happened. Tell myself it was all a nightmare brought on by lack of sleep and an overactive imagination. I almost believed it too, until I saw the footprints. They were faint, but clear enough. Muddy smudges across the hardwood floor, leading from the front door to the center of the living room. Small, child-sized footprints, and not made by shoes. Bare feet. And they weren't mine. My heart stuttered. I backed away slowly, scanning the room, but there was no one there. Nothing. Only the soft tick of the wall clock and the distant wail of sirens somewhere in the city. I told myself I was imagining things, that the footprints must have been mine somehow, even though I knew they weren't. Still, I cleaned them up with shaking hands, scrubbing the wood until it gleamed. I told myself everything would be fine if I could just sleep. Just one night of sleep. But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the building setting my nerves on edge. Sometime after 4 a.m., I heard it. The soft, wet sound of bare feet slapping against the floorboards. Getting closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the covers over my head like a child hiding from monsters. But the sound didn't stop. Came right up to my bedroom door. And stopped. The handle rattled once. Twice. Then silence. I stayed like that until the first light of dawn crept into the room. Only then did I dare get out of bed. My muscles ached from how tightly I'd curled up, and my mouth felt dry and metallic. I moved through the apartment carefully, half expecting something to leap out at me from every shadow. Nothing. But on the inside of my bedroom door, smeared in some dark, tar-like substance, was a handprint. Small, child-sized, and beneath it, scrawled in that same black smear, were 3 words. You are ours. I didn't go to work that day, or the day after. How could I? How do you explain to your boss that you can't come in because you're being hunted by something ancient and wrong? Instead, I stayed inside, curtains drawn, doors locked. I barely ate. I barely slept. I just waited. It wasn't long before the dreams started. Vivid, stomach-churning visions of things clawing their way out of the earth, of towns abandoned and swallowed whole by darkness, of animals twisted into grotesque parodies of life. And always the stone, pulsing, calling. Worse, sometimes I'd wake to find things moved in the apartment. Doors ajar that I knew I had closed. Cabinets hanging open. The faint smell of mud and blood and old decay lingering in the air. Sometimes, I woke up with mud on my hands. I tried telling myself it was sleepwalking, that stress and exhaustion were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew the truth. The thing in Briar Glen hadn't just marked me. It had entered me, burrowed into the cracks of my soul like a parasite. And it was changing me. I first noticed it when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. At first, it was just little things. A shadow moving when I didn't, a flicker of something just behind my shoulder. But one night, leaning closer to the glass, I saw it. For a split second, my reflection smiled back at me. But I hadn't smiled. It wasn't just inside me anymore. It was trying to come through. Desperate, I started researching everything I could find on Briar Glen and places like it. Cursed towns, ancient stones, strange births. The deeper I dug, the more horrifying the pattern became. It wasn't just Briar Glen. It was spreading. There were stories going back centuries. Remote villages abandoned overnight, strange creatures found in fields, entire bloodlines wiped out by disease and madness. And always the black stone. Different names in different places. The hunger, the root, the crawling seed. No matter what they called it, it was the same thing. A piece of something older than humanity, something that had been buried, imprisoned long ago. And now, through me, it was trying to break free. I knew what I had to do. Couldn't run. Couldn't hide. I had to go back. Back to Briar Glen. Back to the stone. And this time, I had to end it, no matter what it cost. I left for Briar Glen at night. Somehow it felt fitting, the beginning and the end all wrapped in darkness. The roads were empty, deserted as though the world itself was holding its breath. Fog swallowed the landscape again, thicker than before, swirling around the car like a living thing. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, fighting the urge to turn back, to give up. But I couldn't. It was inside me now. I could feel it, slithering through my veins, coiling tighter around my mind. Every heartbeat wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to something else. Something ancient. Something starving. I had to end it before it ended me. The town appeared out of the mist like a rotting corpse rising from the earth. Buildings leaned at odd angles. Windows stared out like hollow, empty eyes. The few streetlights still standing flickered weakly, barely piercing the gloom. And in the center of it all stood the stone. Waiting. Calling. I pulled the car to a shuddering stop, stepping out into the heavy, choking air. The earth beneath my feet felt wrong. Soft and wet, pulsing faintly like living flesh. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the stone. It was larger than I remembered, towering over me, its surface slick and black, veins of sickly green light pulsing beneath. It vibrated with a deep, low hum that I could feel in my bones. I drew the iron sledgehammer from the trunk, its cold weight reassuring in my hands. This was it. One swing. One blow to shatter it, to break the hold it had over me. I raised the hammer high, and the ground opened up beneath me. I fell hard, the hammer tumbling from my grasp. Mud closed over my head, cold and choking. I kicked and struggled, somehow managing to drag myself back to the surface. But I wasn't in the town anymore. I was below it. An endless cavern stretched around me, its walls slick with something too dark to be water. Roots twisted and pulsed in the shadows, and all around, I heard the whispers. Hundreds of them. Thousands. I stumbled forward, drawn to a faint glow in the distance. The heart of it all. The true stone. It wasn't a stone at all. It was a mouth. An ancient, gaping maw, ringed with broken teeth of bone and iron, buried in the earth and bound by heavy chains that pulsed with a dying light. It breathed slowly, hungrily, each exhale rattling the very air around me. And standing before it were the others, the lost, people of Briar Glen, their bodies twisted and wrong, their eyes hollow and black. They swayed as one, murmuring in some ancient tongue, their voices melding into a single, terrible hymn. They turned to look at me as one, and I understood. I was never meant to destroy the stone. I was meant to feed it, to carry its seed into the world, to let it root itself in the cities, the highways, the hearts of men, to let it grow and devour until there was nothing left but the endless hunger. The thing inside me pulsed, pushing against my mind, urging me to step forward, to offer myself to the mouth and become its first true vessel. I staggered back, heart hammering. No, I wouldn't let it win. I ran. I don't know how I found the strength, but I ran, through the muck and the rot, through the maze of twitching roots and whispering corpses. The Briar Glen townsfolk gave chase, their limbs jerking and snapping unnaturally as they moved. The surface was so far away. The stone loomed in the distance, growing smaller and smaller. I reached the sledgehammer, still lying where I had dropped it, and snatched it up. There was only one way to end this. I turned and faced the horde. They were nearly upon me, teeth bared, fingers clawing. With a roar, I drove the hammer into the ground, into the heart of the cavern, with every ounce of strength I had left. The earth screamed. The chains around the mouth snapped one by one, the light guttering out like dying stars. The ground split and heaved, swallowing the townsfolk, the stone, the mouth itself into the abyss. I ran. The town collapsed around me, buildings shattering like glass, the very sky splitting open with a deafening crack. I barely made it back to the car, throwing myself behind the wheel and peeling away as the last remnants of Briar Glen were swallowed whole. I didn't stop driving until the sun rose, until the city skyline appeared on the horizon, bathed in the pale light of morning. Only then did I let myself believe it was over. Weeks passed. I tried to go back to a normal life, but normal had become a foreign language. I moved to a new apartment, got a new job, cut all ties to my old life. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I can still hear the whispers beneath the earth. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow, a flicker of movement where there should be none. But I tell myself it's nothing. It has to be nothing, because if it isn't, if it's still out there, waiting, then I didn't bury it deep enough. And next time, there might be no one left to stop it.